Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Friday. As Peter says, happy freaking Friday. So happy for the weekend. I think Peter needs to explain himself. Why is he so
Ooh.
freaking happy for the weekend? Is there something exciting happening this weekend, or is there something that bad happened during the week that leads to maybe you know want to get away from everything for a bit? But either way, we're happy to have you along. Inside the Game podcast live right now on the National Soccer Network on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Roku. So tune in wherever you like. Jonathan Turner alongside Nathan Wangler. It's Friday. It is the last day of the month. Isn't that right there, Nathan Wangler?
It is actually the last day of the month. No, it's crazy. Um, it's been a good February though. It's about to be a crazy March, though, which is great. Again, that's what we sign up for, and so I'm looking forward to it. You know, you got obviously conference tournaments for basketball, and then you consider obviously soccer will be back, not quite in full swing just yet, but it's getting there. Jimmy, what's going on, man? But
We got
a
a lot of
lot of
soccer
stuff
games.
happening here down the stretch. Just a long
We
week with 12-hour days. Yeah, Peter, I've been there, man. So
we just we just
I hear
got
you.
our one of our schedules for one of our leagues. Um, and we haven't actually even announced this league yet either, right? They're saying small echo. Yeah, it's because I have to listen to my speakers. I don't understand why there's a way to solve this problem, but I really want to do it though. All right. Well, Nathan, why don't you tell us about your Tuesday or sorry, your Thursday? I'm gonna go ahead and plug this thing in. I'm gonna get rid of we're gonna switch this over. And I'm just gonna I'm gonna roll the punches here and go a
So I
different way.
wanted to talk. I wanted to open the show up with yesterday. You're talking about the She Believes Cup. It's actually interesting. The United States facing off against Japan in the final in that one. Both teams coming in undefeated, and the United States ended up losing to Japan. And it's funny because that was kind of like redemption from what the Olympics was. They ended up bouncing Japan during the quarterfinal. It was a 1-0 final in that one, but Japan ended up taking down the U.S. and ended what was, the American streak of 5 straight trophies, at that annual tournament that they play. And actually, it was the manager, Emma Hayes, her first defeat since taking charge of the U.S. women's national team. So it was actually interesting to see that team not actually able to pull it out because she talked about it afterwards. And I know this has kind of been the focus of our shows, especially in previous weeks, and a lot of it talking about, the men's soccer team on the U.S. national side. How do they continue to develop? How do they continue to get better? And so we can catch up to the rest of the world. Well, over on the women's side, Japan has already proven that they could do it. And, ESPN had an article obviously out this morning, and I've seen a lot of different podcasts reacting to it. I haven't gotten to really watch all of them, but, Emma Hayes stressed about the importance of player development. And again, that was something we continued to circle back to yesterday and as well as on previous episodes. And again, we can talk about this in the way of, more opportunities have been expanded, the opportunity not just to play the game, but also player development, nutrition, and all those other things to a lot of other countries in the world, and Japan included. And so they have really put themselves in a position to where they can develop players to come out and compete with the U.S. And I think that was kind of like the first sign, at least to Emma, like, hey, the rest of the world is kind of right there. Future World Cups, future, Olympic finals. It's not going to be as easy for us to kind of march through, but like we talked about yesterday, JT, sometimes it's just a lucky break in order to pull off that upset. Gave up a lucky goal. There was a collision at the net. They gave up their first one, equalized, quickly thereafter. And then, it was really despite a barrage in the second half. Just couldn't find a way to get back into the game. And, Japan, Toko Koga ended up putting in, slotted home a rebound in order to give Japan the lead 2-1. Then they end up carrying that to the win. So I think there's a lot to think about on the women's side. And again, we were always phrasing it in the way of it seemed like a sure thing. It seemed like a sure thing for that group to be able to go out and win a 6th straight in that tournament, but it's not a given anymore. And clearly Japan has created a squad, and they were right in the game right up until the very end, even in that quarterfinal in the Olympics. We don't think about it that way. Yeah, that U.S. women's national team marched to another gold medal, but they didn't do it easily. They had some tests and some roadblocks along the way. So Japan is starting to cement themselves as one of the better teams in women's soccer. And, they most goals in that tournament as well. I mean, 4 goals in consecutive games, and now, end up taking home the championship and stopping the American streak. So that could give them a ton of momentum going into the future. But again, it all circles back to they have to continue to do what they've done best. And I called them the model of consistency when we were talking to Dean Linke when it comes to player development. That has to continue to be the focus on the on the women's side. Because again, it seems like the rest of the world in one way or the other has caught up. And I think Japan's win the other day was evidence of that they've officially gotten to a point now to where there's multiple different countries that can really give us a run for our money on the highest level. So I thought that was interesting to see. Clearly falling short in that one, but if they can continue to develop players the way they have, I don't think it's a given anymore in the women's game. And again, we've chatted a lot about the World Cup and the men's side, and can they find a way to get it done on that side of the coin? Yet to be seen. But I thought that was a great job by Japan, and obviously in terms of redemption, that's exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, no question about that. Hang on one second. I'm hearing this tremendous echo. Are you hearing an echo as well? Or no?
No, I'm not hearing an echo.
No? That's
no.
Probably why. So I'm putting it in the wrong thing. Is it better now or no? It's crazy how sound works, you know what I mean? Like you try to do things a certain way, and they don't seem to go your way.
But I can. Yeah. So I'll here's what I'll do. I wanted to see if I could play maybe the short sound bit from Emma Hayes after the game yesterday. Oop.
Yeah, I don't know.
Now you sound loud and clear.
Keep going, man. I'm gonna try and figure the sound thing out. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah, no big deal. So, of course, there's an ad, so we're going to let this play first. I'm not going to buy their product. Oh, it's DoorDash. Okay, never mind. I used DoorDash last night, so I can't exactly say that. So I'll share my screen here and give you guys an opportunity to listen to what she has to say. But I think it's pretty telling, and I think number one, I think the outlook is where it needs to be, especially for someone like Emma Hayes. And it's easy to rest on your laurels. Here's the thing. It's easy to just kind of sit back and go, well, we have it nice. We don't have to continue to get better. But that's just not the case. And it's funny because when you look back, I keep making reference to the U.S. men's basketball team and what they did over in Paris. A lot of that was set up at, what happened at the World Championships. Canada ended up winning it. And, Greece has gotten some wins over us. And we weren't doing what we were supposed to do on the national level. So that's what brought that team together. So, now Japan doing what they did, maybe that could be the inspiration that this U.S. women's national team needs in order not just to, get back and go win another World Cup or win another gold medal, but, this could be a step in the right direction. So here's what Emma Hayes had to say yesterday about this.
You trying to add it in? Can you hear me okay or no?
Yeah, I got you. You got it?
Yeah, so you're trying to add in something?
Yeah, I think I'm sharing my screen right now. Do you see it?
I'm going to add it in now. There it is.
Oh, okay. Anyways, here we go.
It's cyclical in football or in any sport. We've won the gold medal in the summer, and we are wanting to compete to win the World Cup. So we have to keep developing, and development isn't linear. It isn't just in one direction. I think you need moments to, give you a sense of where you are in that path. But I think it's exciting, and I think our future is exciting regardless of the result. As I said, we play one of the best teams in the world today, whose nucleus have played together for a long time, and it showed. So for us, we need to build the group and a larger pool that we think are going to progress us to the World Cup. And now we have to develop our game model so that it plays out with the qualities that we know you need to have to beat the very.
So, anyways, you kind of get the point of what she's saying there, and there were a lot of good things in there. The first thing that I kind of noticed, and oh boy, stop, stop,
What's up?
stop.
What's up?
Oh, geez. Okay, sorry. That my computer was yelling at me about Chick-fil-A. Anyways, success in a lot of ways, and you could also say this about player development, is not linear. Okay, it's not just a straight path from the bottom to the top. Now, I think a lot of people think that. You start here, you go here, you progress here, and then you move all the way up to the top, and we just keep this machine going. You're going to need moments. You're going to need moments where maybe there are pit stops or maybe there are roadblocks in order to really, really test the mental of your player development and who actually should be the best option to be on the field. Because I think the other things you talked about, and it's something that we mentioned about other countries, and it's not just in soccer, but in other sports. A lot of these players in Japan, you could argue, as she said in that interview, have been playing with each other for forever. It's not just the fact that they're the most talented players in the country. They've been playing together for forever. And the U.S. women's national team, at least in this tournament alone, has kind of been shifting the guards a little bit. They've been moving players around, adding players, subtracting players. And so it felt like in one way, they were kind of holding on for that championship game. And then when they got the opportunity to face Japan, and Emma talked about, who has become one of the best international women's soccer teams, just couldn't hold up against them. But that is that roadblock in player development where you can kind of go back and show your players like, hey, listen, we know a lot of people regard us as the best in the world. And there's not a whole lot of, doubt around that conversation. And I'm not just saying that as an American that they're one of the best in the world. They are. And they've proven that year after year. But success in player development is not linear. It's not all in a straight line. And I think that's a loss like that to Japan. And it's a good team, right? This isn't a, we were talking about Trinidad and Tobago and not qualifying for the World Cup and the men's national team yesterday. This isn't that same situation. This is a very, very different situation. They lost in a championship game to one of the better teams in the world. But I think it kind of gave us all that sense of, okay, it's not a given anymore. Japan has caught up. Australia is very good, right? England can compete. Like, there are a list of teams now at the top who can really go toe-to-toe with the United States. So that success is not linear. Neither is player development. There are going to be roadblocks. And so navigating those roadblocks is going to be important for this team on the international level. And again, I know they've figured out how to do that well, but we talked about it with the men's team. What is your best core group? What's your best core group to put out on the field? And part of player development is being able to not only identify who works the best together, but put that best starting 11 out on the pitch. The other thing that I'll say is the sense of urgency that she had in her voice, I thought was telling as well. This can't be something that can be taken lightly. There has to be a constant pressure from the U.S. women's national team that they have to put on the rest of the world to keep up with the pace. They can't afford to sit back. And again, we talked about rest on your laurels. Like, they can't. And they have to continue to churn out new players. So you figure a loss like this would create a little bit of that sense of urgency, right? Because it's not a shock necessarily, a little bit of a disappointment, but there has to be. And a loss like this could obviously spur that on. But at the end, I'll say this, and I think she kind of referenced to it a little bit. I don't know if she referenced it specifically. Women's sports are getting better, JT, and they're getting better all over the place. I think one thing that's great about living in the United States, and I think you and I can agree to this, is that a lot of times, opportunities are made available to us that sometimes in other parts of the world are not made available specifically to women. And, we've had the coaches, we've had the trainers, we've had the development staff, but these countries who have gone up against the U.S. women's national team have seen the way that they do business. And they've brought that blueprint, much like in the other sports, back to their own countries. And Japan is, in my mind, the prime example of that. And they've taken that blueprint and now they've gone out and they've beaten us at the highest stage in that championship level. But it's elevating women's sports all over the globe. And so I think the other cool thing is it's created more parity. Right? We have more parity. We have more talent spread out. It's not just a given that the U.S. is going to be able to make a run to the final. Like, there's more competitiveness all over the place. And Japan, again, I think is the prime example. in terms of a team and a side that can really go up and compete against the women's national team. So that was the other thing that she said. Now, I know that obviously women's soccer has been very popular in the United States. It's a very niche crowd, but it's a very passionate crowd. But it's getting better all over the map, right? So we can look forward to that competitiveness a little bit, knowing that any tournament beyond this point is going to be a dogfight, especially for that national team. So. And I know we've talked about the importance of increasing, viewership and making women's sports more popular. And I thought that was certainly a step in the right direction, at least showing us, hey, the rest of the world is now putting kind of a focus on how do we get good enough to beat the U.S. women's national team in soccer. And they did it. And so I thought it was a great finish. And I think that's a team that's superstar laden. So I think they're in the right direction.
First off, I think I figured out my audio. So that's first and foremost. So thank you, Nathan, for guiding the ship there for a moment. And for full transparency, I'm here today at the studio because we are installing a camera outside on an indoor soccer facility that will be starting to stream indoor games into our studio. And this model will be used in other indoor facilities across the country. So we were installing that. So I took a little bit of my time, so I wasn't necessarily focused on my audio this morning. So I do apologize for that. But a couple things that I want to kind of touch on. First and foremost, the U.S. Women's National Team is in the same predicament as other nations around the world, where they have been the quote-unquote leaders of the game in development, in results, and now everybody is chasing them, right? And chasing them hard, right? And that's a real thing. Now, not everyone is going to be equally involved in that chase and developing players, but there's this chase that's taking place, and yeah, the women's team have won 4 World Cups, right? They've had a lot of success. I actually believe on the way that soccer is managed in this country, that's actually detrimental to the growth of the women's game and the men's game. We talked about it yesterday, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of leagues, right? And everybody in these leagues is claiming to be the best. Everybody in these leagues is claiming that they have the best coaches and the best players, and everybody's the best. And it's my league, right? We don't want to share that success with everybody else, right? I don't think that the overall goal of every single league in this country is to elevate the game in a way in which we win international tournaments. Like, that is not the goal. Now, it's the goal of a single Olympic development program, right? U.S. soccer as a whole will tell you that, but do their actions show that? No, they don't. They do not show that at all on any level, Nathan. And I think it's important that we say that. And I don't know if am I going blank at all? Am I like...
Oh, you're back now.
I got you now. It's weird. I am hardwired in. We are in our studio right now, and I'm assuming this has got to be our production software that keeps doing this, because it doesn't make any sense. I have full internet in this facility right now, and right now I'm just getting, like, I don't have internet, so it's got to be our. But anyways, if the goal is to win international championships, is that what we're all trying to work towards? I understand Emma Hayes. Emma Hayes she's the CEO of women's soccer in this country, leading the international team, right? That's what she does. How much of her hand is in the development of players at 12? You know what I mean? Jurgen Klinsmann came in and made a huge change to the coaching for coaching in this country as part of U.S. soccer. Good, bad, or indifferent. He had a huge hand in all that. I don't know how much of a hand she has in it and how much of that will have an impact on the lower levels working their way up. You like to think it has a lot, but the women's game is they're not in like some like danger area. But if you're talking about them winning World Cups 2 in a row, right? being this team, yes, it can certainly be done, but it's going to be a harder path for them, a much harder path.
Right.
Remember, they beat Japan in
Right.
Canada here back in 2019, right? I think it was 2019, right? Carly Lloyd drilled one from 50 yards out, in midfield, over the goalkeeper. Scored a hat trick in that game. They won 5-1 or 5-2. I don't have the exact score, but they dominated that game. I mean, it wasn't even like it was even the same game. It was just so far apart. Then obviously, this She Believes Cup, Japan wins 2-1. And again, this tournament, I don't put a lot of stake in this tournament. I just don't. It's a tournament that was created here a number of years ago to kind of like be like we're gonna, what are they, like almost like a parade around the country, right? Kind of like that, like the tour when Miguel Cabrera, right, when he's retiring, right? They're gonna the going away tour, right? That's really what
Right.
it is.
Right. Yeah, in the player development aspect of it, it's almost kind of like the U.S. has an opposite problem.
Sorry.
It's almost kind of like the U.S. has an opposite problem compared to the rest of the world. And what
Yeah.
I mean by that, and it's funny because she talked about it briefly, and I think the video actually cut off when she got to this point. But she talked about, we look through the lens of our objectives and say, listen, we certainly looked at our players in the setting, and we definitely have a better understanding of where they are within that journey, right? We talked about the shifting of the guards almost constantly during this tournament for the U.S., and so now she has a better understanding in that. But what she means by player development, and I'm just trying to, I don't know if I'm playing devil's advocate here, not that she has a hand in the youth level per se, but development still happens at the international level. So she says, which players are ready for now, which players are ready for later, and which ones will go to the U23s, which ones will develop from here forward that maybe won't be a part of the international team. And so that's the part that the U.S. maybe isn't struggling with, but it's maybe a new problem. It's not necessarily that they have riches, they have great players all over the place. Where do you put everybody? That's that's the stress that's going to be on the shoulders of Emma Hayes. It's not that you don't have talented players. It's not that you don't have a litany of players that can go out and win on the international level, but how do you decipher? And I think through this tournament, she's actually kind of used this tournament to decide, okay, of the crop that I have, who's going to be the team that I want to go out and compete for a World Cup or a gold medal with? Who is the squad that we have to leave, U23s? Who needs further development? They have rags and riches. They have so many different options. Her job at that highest level is not necessarily going to be, how do we affect youth development? It's going to be who exactly on this field right now who's wearing this jersey is ready to compete at the highest level. And whatever that group was against Japan, clearly, I'm not going to say they weren't ready, but they weren't able to complete the job. And so there are, it's kind of like a weaning out process of what is our group moving forward. And so that's what I think she means by the player development not being linear. Now, the youth side, we can talk about that. I know U.S. women's soccer has done great. We talked about the soccer culture, especially in college. I mean, I think Dean Linke is definitely reflected that. And obviously, he talked about how much he loves covering women's soccer. And I think the big deal is because there's a culture there, especially at the college level, that, they love playing at college. On the men's side, again, the club and all that stuff, and it's a little bit more important. But
yeah, but if you were to ask Emma Hayes if she wants her players playing college soccer, I don't know what her answer would be. I don't know if she's 100% sold on it. You know what I mean? I think the women's game is vastly different than that of the men's game. We know that. We know the women's game, there's a lot more opportunity for sure. But the conversation about, if you talk about professional ranks in men's soccer, they don't want their players playing college ball. If they had a choice, it would not. They would be playing someplace else. So again, when we talk about development can come in a lot of different ways. But in order for a player to grow, they have to be in a challenging environment, Nathan. They have to be in a challenging environment, one that tests them every single day. And again, the college level, right? Now we start talking about the Santa Cruzes and the now University of Texas with Amala Villarreal, and you look at Michigan State and Notre Dame and North Carolina. Like, these are the places where every single player, you have the best players really in the country playing in these university environments. Every single day they're playing top-level soccer and training.
But are they going out and they're fighting and they're playing against the best players in the country? No, they are not. Not in day out. They might be playing here, there, right? When I talk with amateur leagues, they're like, yeah, 7 of the 10 teams that play in our league are garbage. 3 of them are good. So there's 3 good games that come out of that league, right? When we talk about development, this is the problem that I struggle with it when I was in Michigan here coaching, is I had players who just could not play against players that were higher level than them. They struggled. The decision-making is so much quicker, right? The margin for error is so much smaller. And if you look at the MLS Next Worlds, if you look at the ECNL, high-level ECNL games, you'll see that on the field. You'll see these players. They're out there, and they're making, again, first off, from a pressure standpoint, you don't high press in the ECNL for 85 minutes. In high school, you might have a team that literally does that. You might have that in college where they're like having teams high press the entire game to put pressure on that back line to force errors. That's not happening at the international level. You ever watch a soccer game at the highest level? I do not understand why I keep losing my signal. It is very frustrating for me as I sit here right now. If you don't see it, it is all there that I am frustrated that I keep losing the internet. I don't understand. It is crazy to me this is even happening. However, with that being said, the margin for error, the patience that's happening at these levels, it's a chess game. You're moving the ball around, trying to move pieces around so that ultimately you create open spaces and open channels that lead to opportunity further along the line, right? Defenses are going to compact where they get really make the field smaller in the middle of the park and force teams to go outside where they're not as dangerous, and then they'll work the ball back around. That's the game of soccer at the international level. It's not like going and watching a soccer game on a Tuesday afternoon, at park, whatever, and seeing 2 teams, and they're just like, it's balls to the wall, so to speak, or just quickly running down the field. Like, that's not the soccer that we're talking about. It just isn't, because you can't play that way for 90 minutes plus. So development has to happen. When we say margin for error is that if you're a center back, and this is where it's cost us on the men's. I just want to say this. I just want to punch my internet. Right.
Throw the damn computer.
If I could physically punch the internet, I would. If at this point, it's like I don't know what you're doing to me right now, internet, but if I could like punch the cloud right now, I would totally. It probably even worse for like people at home who are like, man, he's in the middle of a great point, and then bam, or a crappy point. Doesn't really matter, I guess. And here I go. I'm frozen, right? So, but yeah, our center backs have been a huge problem for us. They make these bonehead plays. Our defensive center mids, our outside backs. You get forward and you make a good run and you can't pass the ball in the attacking third, right? Or you make a bonehead decision in the middle of the park that costs you a counterattack and a goal. Think about this for a second. Are the U.S. men's national team, U.S. women's national team? First off, let's talk women for a second. They're not losing games by a mistake. They're like, when I say they lose, like, they're not self-inflicting like, fundamentally flawed things, right? There are moments in games where, hey, a miscue happens. Good teams make mistakes. They lose, right? It's like the U.S. men's national team. They, just like the Lions of yesteryear, are finding creative ways to lose soccer games. They're not finding creative ways to win soccer games. They're finding creative ways to lose them. And when I say creative, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of this. This is back in I'm probably going to get frozen, so I'm going to just FYI, I'll pause myself if it happens. But what I'll say is that I was at my alma mater playing Athens. At home, we had a really good team. We had the kickoff, okay? And in our world, I didn't like kicking the ball 60 yards and pressuring the back line like they do in Europe. I just felt like, I wanted the ball, right? We want the ball. So our whole mantra was about pushing the, on kickoffs, going backwards. And sometimes we go back to our back line. I didn't necessarily say go all the way back to our back line, but it would happen, right? And then we build, right? Give ourselves a chance to kind of see the field a little bit and start to build. Kickoff goes back to our I believe our defensive center mid, and then the ball goes out wide to our right back. Our right back decides to play it right up the middle of the park. Does not make a good pass. Gives it right to Athens, and they score 8 seconds into the game. We had the kickoff, Nathan. We had the kickoff, and we allowed a goal to happen 8 seconds into a game. How do you think that game went for us?
Yeah, not great.
Not great.
Not great.
Now, okay, what does that have to do with the men's national team? Well, if you have 11 players on the field who are above average, but then they're playing against a team that has 11 players that 90% of them are like excellent, right? 85 on the the how good they are meter, right? Your guys are all 60, 65, right? If you look at FIFA and see our players, they're like in the 60s. Everybody else is in the 80s, right? You see this. These players have more. They're more dynamic. They understand the game differently. They read the game differently. They're smarter. They're faster. There's a lot of things that go into that. When that happens, as I just froze again, when that happens, the decision making is the biggest hindrance. It's the biggest one because player 85 over here is playing in a level where he's playing against 85s all the time, where player 60 is playing against players who are in that 6 all the time, right? They're playing, and if they do play in the 80, the higher level player, well, what environment is it in, right? And I know that a lot of our players play overseas now, and they play but again, how many of them are starting and playing at a high level in that environment all the time where they're being tested and challenged and evolving? And that's going to be the biggest thing for us from a technical, fundamental, talent level. Well, how do we develop our players? On the women's side of the game, they are the 85 and the 90. So when they're out on the field, they're playing against the 65, the 70, right? The player that talent-wise, right? That's what they're playing against. And so when they make a mistake, it's not as detrimental as it is to the United States. It just the men. It just isn't. You make a mistake, you can typically recover from that. But the men can't afford to make a mistake in those environments.
Yeah, and this kind of stresses exactly what you were talking about. As a coach, you got to play a complete game. Yeah, you have to play from beginning to end. You have to play your perfect game. And the tough thing is it's not you can't just play one perfect game against one team. You might have to do that 2-3 times in a row. And so that's the whole thing is like we don't have enough talent to just fall back on and just say, just go get it done. This isn't basketball where you can just be like, hey, go get a bucket and win this. It's different than that. And so that's the key difference, especially when we're talking about the difference between the women's national team and the men's national team. Yeah, there is more room for error on the women's national team side. But, to quickly reference, my point a little bit earlier, the levels in which they find these players is also a little bit different. And this isn't to say that Emma Hayes is completely invested in what's going on in NCAA Division I college soccer in the country. But I think it is important to notice every single player on that 2023 team, every single one of them that went on to win, who played in the FIFA World Cup in 2023, all 20 of those former players played at the NCAA Division I level. 19 of the 22 players on the 2024 Olympic team played at the NCAA Division I level. So to me, that's kind of a different model than what we see out of the men's side. And I know you want to see them play against the highest talent, and that's why they're in those club sports, because we feel like we need to, again, earmark the best players and put them in those leagues so that they're not, maybe we think that in college they're not going to be playing against the highest talent. But it's just interesting to see that discrepancy between the women's side and the men's side, how it's kind of approached differently in this country. But to your point, yeah, JT, they have to play perfect. They have to play perfect every time. And it's a matter of, again, getting the right group. And we talked about the other day, getting rid of the cancerous growths in the locker room. Like, if you can somehow manage to cut that out before we even get to the World Cup, before 2026, if we can have our group, our list, our dudes, in order to try at least to put together that perfect game a couple of times to put us in a position to where, again, we can get a huge win on home soil, which I think one of the biggest reasons why Dean called this the biggest World Cup of all time is maybe because it is going to change a lot of lives here in the United States. But more importantly than that, it's one thing if the U.S. men's national team goes out and gets a huge upset win in, I don't know, Bulgaria, whatever, over whoever, some foreign land. It's another thing if they do it right here in the U.S. It's another thing if they do it here on home soil in front of the people who want to come see them. Because I know they play friendlies, I know they play exhibitions and all that other stuff, in a lot of them against Mexico here in the United States, but in the World Cup, in the biggest stage, against the best players. Again, I said this yesterday, one big win, one big upset win could change the entire trajectory of the way this thing is going. But it's a different set of issues, JT, when we talk about the men's team and the women's team. Different set of issues, different ways of approaching it. And it's what kind of creates this complexity to this conversation, because it's not two different sports, but it almost kind of feels that way, in the way that they produce and the way that, and that's not to say that there's not the same leagues. The U.S., youth teams are there for both men's and women's. But like I said, it's a different set of problems for the women's team than necessarily we see out of the men's. And now you throw in the fact that everybody else is kind of on that level too, including Japan. And now it kind of creates for more excitement whenever the next international tournament is. I'm excited to see who steps up. And I think, again, the success of Emma Hayes' coaching career is going to be decided on, does she pick the right group? Right? Does she find the talented players that all mesh together at the same exact time? That, to me, is the most important thing. And for coaches, it's funny, for head coaches, and you being one at one point, maybe you can identify this. It is a lot of X's and O's. More so than that, though, it's managing personalities. It's managing who fits well emotionally and stuff like that into a locker room that can spur us in the right direction. And so I think for U.S. soccer, this could be men's or women's, it's also identifying who works the best together. And that's something that I think Emma Hayes, at least the success of her career, not going to be necessarily on the X's and O's. When you're coaching an all-star team, it almost feels like you can just roll them out there and let them go play. You almost kind of have the best job in the world, because you can put a strategy together, but at the end of the day, it's going to be your superstars, your all-stars that win the game for you. There's this old adage that, players win games, coaches lose them. And I am 100% in on that. I agree with that 100%. Because coaches, the reason why they say that is because players are the ones that actually play the game and win the game. Coaches are the ones that put you in the position to go out and win the game. So, and if a group of players believes in you, you can call peanut butter and jelly 10 straight times, and they're going to run through a brick wall and go win the game for you. So that is the key of, what does this loss do? Is there a hangover effect for the U.S. women's national team? Or does it kind of kick them in the right direction? Seeing Japan celebrate with the trophy and now believing that, they are caught up. How does she put the pieces in places and pick the right group in order to make sure that, not that it never happens again. I mean, you're going to lose games. That happens. But what does she do in order to get this team moving in the right direction? because she could very well, it could go one of two ways after this loss. And I don't think it's going to plummet. I don't think we're going to be irrelevant, but that's kind of where my mindset is after watching that game yesterday.
So a couple things. One, managing a locker room is extremely difficult. I especially in 2025. There's a lot of distractions, a lot of things that is going to, doesn't matter what level either, right? High school, college, professional. There's obviously unique situations in each environment that would make it different, but managing locker rooms and players is the hardest part of your job. That's why in basketball now, like every team has like a general manager, right? Like so like their whole purpose is to manage operations, right? Or basketball operations, right? Which is new, right? It's not always about the best player. It's about the player that fits the best in the system, right? So whatever system you're running, like we don't need like 12 Messis on our team, right? We don't need 12 Alex Morgans or 12. We don't need that. I mean, honestly, if you asked someone, "Oh my God, that'd be great," we had them. No, because it wouldn't work because they all have they all have the nuances to them. You need 25 players that all fit into your system the way that you want them to, that understand the game and fit into the culture the way you want to. And that's really the most challenging part of this, right? And then you've got to, if you're a coach, you're also battling this whole thing where everybody else knows something that you don't, right? Think about that. Everybody and their mother is telling you, well, Christian Pulisic should be playing here. And you're like, no, I'm going to play him there. This is what I know, right? And you start talking about at that level, everybody has an opinion about how you're managing it. And I don't care. I don't care what coach is out there or whatever. They all listen to it. They all pay attention. It's so hard not to. They're constantly, they probably laugh about a lot of it too, but they're being reminded of it all the time. There's no way they're not. So, my thought process in regards to this is that it's not always about the best player. It's about the right player. Right. And then, you talk about, the other aspects of this, which is, again, very different, men, women, right? Very different. But women's side specifically, for them, it's like, okay, they've always been winners. Right? They've always been winners, right? They are not the team. When they go to play, chances are they're the favorite. That is vastly different if you're the one who is expected to win, right? Right now, the women are ranked number 1 in the world. All right, the men are ranked 16th. All right, so, and to be fair, I feel like that's too generous. I don't think the men are ranked 16. That's my personal opinion. I think that's too high, but fair. So as a player, right, when you walk into North Carolina, you walk into the likes of Kentucky as a basketball player, Indiana, there are banners hanging on the rafters that say national championship. When you're walking into international camp, U.S. camp, every single year as a player, there are 4 World Cup trophies you walk past on your way to the pitch. You are expected to have success and results. You have to know that going into it. The amount of pressure that puts on a specific player and the organization as a whole, it's immense. Right?
Right.
How much pressure do you think the men's national team has? They're not walking past these magnificent World Cup trophies on their way to the pitch. They got a couple gold cups and a CONCACAF, whatever, regional tournaments. Okay. They should be playing so much looser and more of a chip on their shoulder, like we saw with, again, Oak University in the men's basketball game last year, right? play loose. They had a player pop off, right? And boom, right? It made a name for themselves. We need more of that from the men's national team. But the women, they have to manage that. And how do you stay hungry when you've already won it a bunch of times?
Yeah.
Like, how do you stay
Yeah.
hungry? How do you know? There's something to be said when you haven't won something. Like the Chicago Cubs never won a World Series, or they hadn't won a World Series, but for so many years leading up to when they won it back, 2013,
16.
or whatever, huh?
16.
16. Like when they won that, I mean, they've been fighting so hard. Now you finally had that off your back, and okay, now you can relax a little bit and go do it. But they've been back to the World Series since, right? They went back. I don't think they haven't won it, but they went back. Again, I don't follow baseball.
We've been back to the playoffs, haven't been back to the series, but
they
they've
got
been
that
back
whole thing
yeah.
off their back, right? So it's like, okay, so now now that's another thing. They got to get back there and do it again. But there's this pressure associated with expectations, right? And if you haven't won it enough, then there becomes this pressure like, oh my gosh, we've never won it, and we haven't done this, and now there's this pressure coming in, that you can get from another level of pressure. And how do they manage that?
Right.
For someone that's watching America at different points, right? I'm watching them at the youth level. I'm watching them at the high school level. I'm watching them at the collegiate level. I'm watching them at the semi-professional level. I'm watching them at the professional level. The player today is not built the same way. The vast majority of them do not carry themselves, hold themselves to the same standards that we as individuals were holding ourselves to 30 years ago. I will continue to say that. It's not. And now that, again, we are a different world today than we were 30 years ago.
Right.
Fine. If we talk about mentality, I don't know if we can find enough players in the world today that are going to go out there and be like, just hard-nosed hitting, whatever. Julie Ertz, longtime member of the U.S. women's national team, that girl would go into tackles like you never saw a female player go into. She did not care about what would happen to her. She would just go hard into tackles and just kill people, right? Figuratively, of course, right? But just going hard. How many players do that? How many players go out there and give up their body on every play and every moment, leave it on the field? How many of those are on the field at any given time?
Yeah.
And how many of those do you need on your field in order to be successful? How many players do you need to have? I would argue your entire back line has to be made up of players like that. The entire back line is that whole makeup. Your center defensive midfielder, your outside mids have to be that way. And to be fair, if you want to be a natural goal scorer, you need to be a player that is not afraid to get dirty, not afraid to roll your sleeves up and go do something. Like that's what you need out of your team. And how many players are able to do that? So, it's one of those things where it's development comes in a lot of different things. You mentioned it's not linear. Maybe I'll come back. There I am. Hey, you want to be the best possible version of yourself, right, when you're playing at the highest of levels, but you have to be mentally fit, psychologically fit, you have to be physically fit, you have to be in shape, both from a standpoint of how you eat and how you take care of yourself. There's a lot of things, right, that you have to be doing, right, in order to be playing at a high level. And I believe that the players are doing that who are in those roles, because else they wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
For me, it's about that next level, right? How does the player who's playing on the men's national team, women's national team, how do they raise the bar from a psychological and emotional component that puts them in a place where they are putting themselves in the best possible place on a field to be successful? And that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, for any team right now in this country.
And how do they mesh too? Here's my thing, JT. When you put selfless and superstar next to each other, typically those things don't mesh very well, right? It's like peanut butter and pine tar. It typically doesn't go well together. So the biggest part about player development in my mind, and you talked about how the player today is not the same player that it was 30 years ago, and I agree. right? And I think sports across the board have evolved, right? Basketball, not as physical, more European, more pace and space, more 3-point shooting, more technical. But you could also argue the AAU culture in a lot of ways is taken over, right? Everything's a dunk and a three. I have to explain this to my dad. I'm like, Dad, 3 points is more than 2. Like if you have guys who are 6'10" and can go out to the 3-point line and drill it all day, why wouldn't you do that? That automatically gives you an advantage. Hockey's the same way. You don't have enforcers anymore. Across the board, you can say that sports have changed, but it's also the individualization and the specialization of these players as they're coming up through the system. That has also changed a lot too, right? Those tools, the resources that are available to these players is a lot different in 2025 than I'm sure if you went all the way back to 1995. I'm sure it's far different than what it was then. Medicine, training, resources, traveling, all of these things. And I'm not saying that that wasn't available then, but what that kind of creates, and again, I'm just speaking from a general perspective here, is a player who is so individualized and so about their own personal goals and what they want to accomplish is that, when you talk about the U.S. men's national team, you have a group full of superstars who all want to be superheroes, who all want to be that one that make, that big moment or take that risk. Or so how do you, and it's a really hard job, because it's funny when you think about coaches on the international level, you're like, oh, well, they have the easiest job in the world. You just throw whoever out there and they can win. Not necessarily, right? You have to find the ones that it's not just hunger, but you have to find the ones that are almost willing, as you mentioned, to put their body on the line to go win a game for the country. And I thought Julie Ertz was a great example. I mean, if you're married to Zach Ertz, I feel like you have no choice but to be, a dog, if you will, a DAWG. Because, Zach Ertz is one of the better tight ends that I've ever watched. National Football League. It took down the Lions with the Commanders. So RIP. But, he was in a position there too to win. But there's no way you can be married to that guy and not be willing to go, put some bodies on the ground. But do we find the guys that, emotionally speaking, and that's the component, is soccer is such a technical game. And when you talk about, getting coaches from overseas, I just don't know sometimes, JT, if they can talk to American players the same way an American coach can talk to American players. And that's not to say that technically speaking, they don't know the game. I'm sure he's a genius. I'm sure he's trying to, like I said, kind of not copy that model, but take some pieces of the model from overseas and put it in USA Soccer so we can get to that level. But emotionally, does he speak to these guys on the same level than maybe someone who is from here? That's the tough thing, and how do you get selfless out of superstar? That's been the big issue. And we played Taylor Twellman's rant to open our show the other day. And again, he mentioned prima donnas. I'm not going to say all of them are prima donnas. And I'm also not going to say none of them went through a struggle in life, because that's not genuine. But how do you get a group full of guys who are just so impassioned about putting their bodies on the line to go win for their country? That's the big struggle. That's the big focus in my mind when it comes to the U.S. men's national team. And I just looked at those rankings. I saw we're a couple of steps ahead of Mexico. And so that's, whether you want to believe that or not, kind of circles back to my point yesterday. I think we've gotten to a point to where we're maybe a step better than them in a lot of different examples. And we've shown that really since the 1990s. So, yeah, it's a tough ask to really kind of pick out the best of the best, and not just the best talent wise, but the best group that meshes together and realizes that they need to go produce. And you mentioned pressure and expectations, right? Expectations are great. But pressure, I don't think there's any more pressure than playing on your home turf. I don't think there's any more pressure than playing in your own country, and it's awesome to see them beat Mexico here. It's awesome to see them beat Panama or whoever else on American soil. But can they not only advance out of the group stage, but can they make some waves? I think this tournament is the most important in the history of soccer in the United States. I think this World Cup is the World Cup. We have to do something. And so I think simply having it here creates that pressure and those expectations. Not necessarily the World Cup, infertility or whatever, all that stuff. Yeah, we won Gold Cups and CONCACAF and all that, Nations League. Being at home is going to create that pressure. how do they respond to that pressure? That's what's going on in my mind.
No, they're all great points, and I think for the sake of me freezing, I might just not talk the rest of the show. But which is
Hey, we made it through.
maybe
little by little, step
you
by
made it
step.
through. Hey, real
we
quick,
still got 4 minutes left
I want
here.
to announce this. So earlier this week, I was contacted by a local. Well, I say local. Crane's Business is, I believe, is a national publication. I believe, but they contacted us here earlier this week. I had a chance to sit down with them on Tuesday, and they actually put out their the article this morning on their website. I freeze again here. So, but anyways, I just I want to let people know that we just did that. Some more announcements will be coming out here in the coming days about some of our new relationships and our leagues that we're covering. A lot of games coming up here in the very near future, and obviously we are obviously excited about that on a lot of different levels. So, but yeah, I did. I just want to make sure I pointed that out here before we wrap this show up here today. We want to obviously thank everyone for stopping by and being a part of what we do here. We've been having a blast. We've been talking about U.S. women's and men's national team all week this week. I want to get into the MLS next week. Nathan, I really want to dive into MLS and talk about what's going on there and really talk about what that league looks like. Something about schedule drops. Yeah, we actually will be looking. Our schedule right now for March is getting pretty busy. So we are working on that, as we speak. And so once we have that ready to go, we will announce that. But a lot of things are in place. We just received 78 games yesterday from one of our leagues just for one conference in Northern California. So we're working on that. That's 78 games from, I think, March through May. And we have another 250 that are coming down the line here in the next couple weeks. So we believe you me, we will be putting our schedule in place here over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, that's Friday. That's a wrap here on this episode. And again, we appreciate you stopping by and being a part of this. We have a blast doing it. I'm gonna go look at my internet, figure out why my internet. Right now, my internet deserves a punch. It does. It does.
Is Nate playing Fortnite or something in the other room? Is that what's going on?
I don't know. I envision that my internet, if it's a person, it's like Wreck-It Ralph right now. That's why I feel like my internet is. I just want to go. I want to go punch Wreck-It Ralph over all of this.
You go get him.
What? I don't understand it. I mean, I actually literally unplugged my hardwire and went off of Wi-Fi, and that hasn't solved the problem. So I'm actually starting to think it's just. I think it's our production software, and maybe it just doesn't like me right now. So, which is possible because sometimes I'm not likable.
Making enemies out there. Yeah.
I should start saying it. Internet versus everybody. Maybe is what I should start doing. It's like change it from soccer versus everybody to internet versus everybody. Right?
Internet, right? Because it sucks.
It's no. Actually, I love you, internet. Please don't do this.
We need
again.
you.
I love you,
but also do your job. Yeah,
do your job. That's right. We pay you way too much money, internet. Why aren't you doing your thing? Right. This is going to turn into a TikTok. I just know it is. It's but let's see here. We had a couple comments coming in throughout from Peter and Jimmy. Skills are one thing, but mental agility is a top skill needed. How a player responds to a missed goal, missed pass, and being benched, and overall what happens in their personal life. Keep personal issues at home and bring the business onto the pitch. 2016, first in over 100 years. See, there you go. That was in regards to the Cubs and the schedule drops. So, yeah, we're working on all that stuff, but thank you for commenting. But that'll wrap it up. Nathan Wangler, Donovan Turner.
Bye.
Just want to, yeah. Goodbye, everybody. Bye.
This has been a presentation of the National Soccer Network.